In 2025, Canada heads to the polls, and the voices of GTA Muslims matter more than ever. We're the fastest growing population in the Greater Toronto Area, and we're bringing our values, concerns, and hopes to the ballot box. From global justice to local struggles, housing, Islamophobia, foreign policy, the issues affecting Muslims are on the front lines. Introducing GTA Muslims Today, your go-to source for exclusive federal election 2025 coverage. Watch GTA Muslims Today, only on Muslim Network TV.
Live from our Toronto studios, this is GTA Muslim Today's live special election coverage. Assalamu alaikum, I am Ahmed Ramadan.
And I'm Sakina Ghayur. Over the next few hours, we will be covering interviews from different candidates, election coverage, and expert analysis as the polls come to a close.
It is our honor and privilege to be bringing you this special election tonight covering the Canadian elections. Over the past few weeks, we have been all over the city talking to candidates, organization leaders, community leaders, and you, the voters. Please stay tuned after the elections for our show, GTA Muslims Today, where we're going to be continuing to cover the GTA. We're going to be all over talking about food, art, and culture, different parks, and special stories that you're not going to hear anywhere else. Sakina, what are you most looking forward to once we start doing these coverages?
To be honest, here in the GTA, we have some amazing events, amazing community events, amazing food spots, amazing just overall culture. And I'm really, really excited to highlight and cover that over the next few weeks, inshallah.
Yeah, I look forward to that too.
So, Brother Ahmed, can you tell us a little bit about what are the polls looking like right now? Where are we at?
So right now, just to give people a snapshot of where the polls are at, right now, the Liberals are at 23, the Conservatives are at 10, and I believe the Bloc Québécois have one, or it looks like that one has gone. There was one there before, but it's not there anymore. And just to let our viewers know, the way that elections work in Canada is that each riding has votes. So it doesn't matter how many votes you get, whether you get 100% or 51%. Once you've reached the threshold to win that riding, it counts as one seat for the party.
Amazing. So let's hear from Brother Moise, who is live at Mississauga City Hall right now. And he is at the polls. He is going to be looking a little bit at what are people saying? Are people done voting? Are people lining up to vote? Recently, I believe the website has been down because of all of the rush. So let's see what's really happening at the scene.
Ahmed, Sister Sakina, thank you so much. I'm reporting live right now from Mississauga City Center, and the population of this community is more than 120,000 people. What's even more cool is that the Muslim population right here is at 22.6%, becoming one of the largest Muslim concentrated communities in all of Ontario. Mississauga City Center has been a liberal stronghold for the past decade. However, with Omar Al-Ghabra standing down in a highly Muslim mobilized community, the voting could be changing and the direction could also be changing as well. With polling results holding liberals in the lead at 61% and conservatives at 32%, a strong Muslim voting push could actually sway the results with time left in the voting today. This is Moise Rahman from Muslim Network TV. Brother Ahmed and Sister Sakina, right back at you.
I think that really highlights why it has been so important for the Muslim community to go out and vote, and why advocacy organizations across the board have been highlighting this and pushing this on the Muslim community. So recently we have been attending many different rallies of the leaders of these parties. And Brother Ahmed, you've been at all three of them. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience at these rallies? What happened on the scene?
So it's been a very cool and interesting experience to see how each party, the rallies take place. You know, it was 3 very different locations for each one. For Pierre Poilievre, the rally was in almost like a convention center. For Mark Carney, the rally took place actually in an airport hangar. And for Jagmeet Singh, his rally was in a park in downtown Toronto. So each one had their own kind of location. A lot of people were there. They were very supportive. And we were able to see a lot of candidates that are running right now supporting their leader and, just trying to support the party itself. And each one really spoke about the issues that they wanted to highlight and care about. We saw a lot of voters. We spoke to a few of them that are there. And there is a sort of coalescing around each party and really believing in the leader that they've chosen for their party.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that with we've also seen some of the rallies, some of the protests, some of the interventions that have happened at these rallies. We're first going to take a little bit of a look into what happened at the rallies, starting with the Liberal rally. And so we are going to be covering a little bit about the Conservative rally as well. And you were there on the scene outside the rally. And it seemed like there was a lot happening even outside the premises. Can you tell us a little bit about that before we go, and take a look?
Yeah, so there was Palestinian demonstrators outside the Pierre Poilievre rally there. They were trying to educate people that were coming in about, some of the rhetoric that has been coming out of the Conservative Party. I think we will speak to some of our guests a little bit later on that will provide an expert analysis of what was taking place, why people care so much about what's taking place in Palestine and how it affects Canadians here. So they were demonstrating, and then a lot of the people that were coming in were paying attention to that. Some of it got a little bit, I don't want to say heated, that's maybe too strong a word, but there was a little bit of, friction between the groups. And I think at the end of the day, something I realized is both groups were really saying the same thing on the surface. They were both saying, they were both chanting for Canada, and the Palestinian demonstrators were saying, we're cheering for Canada because they want Canada to take a stance on human rights. And I think the Conservative, if I'm speaking specifically about the Conservatives, they were speaking about Canada first, but I think they don't realize the influence that some of the international pressure has on Canada itself.
So let's take a little bit of a look into the Conservative rally and see, and here's what happened there.
But in order to have a bright future, we need to have sound, solid money. Inflation has raged out of control ever since Mr. Carney became Trudeau's economic advisor, precisely because the government is spending too much. Today, I laid out a detailed plan about how we're going to fix our budget to stop the inflation that is eroding your purchasing power for food and housing. What we're going to do to start with is cut the waste. I announced that we're going to streamline the bureaucracy through attrition. Every time 3 people retire, we're only going to hire 2 back. Over time, we'll reduce the size of the bureaucracy, which reduces the tax bill for the people paying for it. Then there are the consultants. We're spending $20 billion a year on consultants. That works out to $1,400 in taxes for every Canadian family just to fund consultants. But don't worry, the Liberals know there's a problem with it. They said we're going to spend less money on consultants, but to come up with a plan to do that, they hired some consultants. We've got a better idea. Our Conservative plan for change will cut the budget for consulting by $10 billion annually.
So let's take a little bit of a look at what was happening outside the premises of this rally. As Brother Ahmed mentioned, we had some protesters, there were some people outside. Let's take a look at what was happening.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Ahmed Ramadan for Muslim Network TV, and this is GTA Muslims Today. As you can see outside of the rally for Pierre Poilievre, there has gathered Palestinian protesters who are very disturbed with some of the rhetoric that has come out from the Conservative Party.
I want to go to your country.
We stand here with a heavy heart, burdened by the images, the sound, and the stories revolution! Intifada revolution! Intifada, intifada!
They have been here pretty much from the beginning till now, trying to raise awareness about what is taking place in Palestine and many of the concerns in the community, considering the diversity of Canada and what is taking place.
We also got some footage from the NDP rally, and you also got an exclusive interview with Jagmeet Singh. So let's take a view into that, and that interview aired a little bit earlier today as well. So let's take a look into that rally and what happened there.
Right now, there's a tough time for a lot of Canadians. People are looking at the chaos and the turmoil being created by Donald Trump, and I'm wondering how that's going to affect their lives. They're worried about job losses. They're worried about things already being so expensive, getting even more expensive. And in all of that, the question is, who's going to fight for you and your family? Who's going to stand up for everyday people, not the billionaires? Who's going to put working class people, middle class people first, not the CEOs and the executives? And who is that? That's right. Look, we Democrats believe that we are better off when we take care of each other. We're better off when we look out for one another. We're better off when we lift each other up. We know how to get through a difficult time. We know how to get through stormy weather. We get through difficult times and the storm that is being represented by Donald Trump and the attacks on our country by looking after our neighbors, by taking care of one another and lifting each other up. So, in this time,
you sold out your country for a $2 million pension.
That's not true, buddy. That's not true, buddy. Appreciate you all. Thank you so much. I love the NDP. So listen, what we know is in this time, the other options. What are the other options out there? While people are hurting right now, we've got Pierre Poilievre, whose proposal, his plan in this difficult time when people are already hurting is to cut the things that you need. To cut healthcare. Right? To cut pensions. That's his plan. To cut pensions for seniors. He wants to cut healthcare. He wants to cut dental care that seniors have just received, that kids just got. He wants to cut the things that people need. And Canadians are looking at that and saying, you know, that's not good for me. That's not good for my families. That's not good for our country. And then they started looking at Mark Carney. And sadly, he's also talking about cuts. He's proposing big cuts. In fact, $43 billion in cuts. And longtime liberals are saying that's his plan, to cut the things you need. He's proposing to cut the operating budget. And he said what's in that. He said that's healthcare, that's pensions, that's transfers. Is that what we need right now? No. He's also someone who was the chair of a large corporate landlord that he was the chair of that not just a couple months ago, really, up until January, that profited off of the housing crisis. Right? I'm worried that that's not someone that's going to fix the problem when they profited off the problem. They purposely found affordable apartment buildings and they called them depressed assets. They said, you know what? People are paying $1,000 a month rent in Toronto. We could probably triple that and make more money. Right? They went after hardworking Canadians. They went after them to make more money off their backs. I think that's wrong. I think that's wrong. And then he's also the chair of a company where he managed funds personally, where they purposely registered in other countries to avoid paying their fair share. Right? Billions of dollars of tax evasion. In fact, Brookfield Investments, the company he was the chair of, was one of the biggest tax dodgers in our country. So I don't think that's someone that's actually going to stop these offshore tax havens. He's not someone that's going to stop big corporations from not paying their fair share. He's going to support them. That's what he's done. And that's not the right thing to do right now. That's not going to help us out in this difficult time. And so here's what we're proposing. If you believe that everyone in our country should have a good job, that one job should be enough to be able to have a roof over your head, to be able to put food on the table, have a fridge full of groceries, be able to save up for a rainy day, maybe save up for a vacation, or to take your loved ones out for a special treat. If you believe that that's possible and that's the kind of Canada we want to build, vote for New Democrats, send us to Ottawa, and we'll do it. If you believe, my friends, if you believe that we can cap the price of groceries to bring them down, make them more affordable, vote NDP. If you believe we can ban corporate landlords from buying up affordable homes, vote NDP.
As you can tell, there was a lot of energy in the room. As we, let's just take a moment here to pause and take a look back at the race. What is happening right now? What are we looking at right now? Can you tell us a little bit more?
So right now we're seeing still 23 seats for Liberals, 10 for Conservatives, and that one for Bloc Québécois that had disappeared earlier has come back right now. And it looks like actually one has switched over again, where there's 22 for Liberals, 2 for Bloc Québécois, and still 10 for Conservatives. So let's talk a little bit about these numbers. As many of you know, in Canada, you need 172 seats for majority. So there's still about 309 seats left to be decided, and there's about 12 minutes and a half until the next poll closes. So just delving into a little bit these numbers that we're talking about, these initial results are primarily from Atlantic Canada, where the Liberals have traditionally held strong support. The early lead for Liberals suggests that they are maintaining their foothold in these regions. However, the Conservatives' early seats also reflects some of the gains that they've made in Newfoundland and Labrador, indicating some regional shifts. The Bloc Québécois securing a seat early on aligns with expectations in their Quebec strongholds. It's important to note for our viewers that this is still very early on. There's still a lot of election to go, and we're going to be here to break this all down for you as the night goes on.
Okay, amazing. Can we take a look into what the Muslim voting scene is looking like right now in Mississauga, in the entirety of the GTA? Where are Muslims making a mark?
For sure. So let's see where we're going to start here. In Aurora, Oak Ridges, there are 245 projected victory margins, and the number of Muslim voters in that riding is 8,901. And these numbers show you the influence that Muslims have during this election.
And so this is, again, I think the result of the Muslim community really pushing over the last few days that this election really matters and that this election, the Muslim voice matters. Is there any other, stats that you can share with us from the GTA about the Muslim community?
So one thing before we go on to our next figures, and something that you've been talking about, and we've also heard this a lot from many of the community leaders, the importance of Muslims going out and exercising their right and obligation and duty to vote. Because if you're not voting, then you're not participating in the process. And, it is, although a lot of them said that beyond the election, you need to be involved as well. But casting your vote is the first step in that process. So our next stat is from Brampton Center, where the projected victory margin is 2,145. But the number of Muslim voters in that riding is 6,085. And again, you see the impact Muslims have and how they could swing in an election.
It's amazing to see. And there's some other key ridings as well. Like we discussed earlier about when we were in the Erin Mills riding, how 25% of that population is Muslim. And so it is really amazing to see that us Muslims really using that and putting out our votes, going out, and especially in the last few hours now, we are basically closed, right? The polls are closed, and it's going to be really interesting to see where the Muslim community left a mark, where you can really see that impact, inshallah.
Yeah, there's only about 8-9 minutes left until the polls close. And like you're saying, in Mississauga Center, there's about 20% Muslim population. In Milton, there's 30% population Muslim. We went over some of the figures in Brampton earlier, exact percentages of how many Muslims. But we could talk now about Brampton East. And, we're going to go through some of these numbers just to show you the sort of wide range around the GTA that Muslims have influence and how they can affect the election today. So in Brampton East, the projected margin of victory is 3,740. The number of Muslim voters in that area is 5,190. Again, they could swing the election there.
Yeah, and really this election, there's so much on that ballot. Gaza is on that ballot. Islamophobia is on that ballot. And it really shows us the impact that the reasons why the Muslim community really needed to exercise that. And we can see it happening in front of us.
And we've actually spoken to a lot of people during our interviews where they've said, you know, yes, Gaza is probably the main issue right now that Muslims are concerned about. And not just Muslims, but obviously a lot of people that are aligned with human rights and care about, you know, international issues and human rights. But as Muslims and as Canadians, we're also concerned with a lot of the issues other Canadians are concerned with, like cost of living. You know, the housing crisis obviously has been very important. You know, being able to afford your groceries and you know, just how far your dollar will take you. You know, healthcare, crime, all these things affect Canadian Muslims just like they affect all other kind of Canadians. So let's run through some of these numbers a little bit more quickly just to show you the kind of influence that Muslims have on this election. We have Brampton South. The projected victory margin is 2,987. The number of Muslim voters in this area is 4,433. We have Brampton East. The projected victory margin is 914, under 1,000 votes. Yet the Muslim population of voters is 6,195.
Wow.
We have Cambridge. 504 is the projected margin of victory. The number of Muslim voters here is 2,347. Davenport, again, just over 500 voters, and the number of Muslim voters, just over 500 is the margin of victory, the projected margin of victory, but the number of Muslim voters is 2,168. Don Valley East, and this is pretty wild. The projected victory margin is 10,143. The number of Muslim voters in Don Valley East is 12,500. Again, every single one of these writings, we're seeing how much influence and how much the vote of Muslims matter in this election.
And we had the privilege over the last few weeks to talk to some of the community leaders in the Muslim community. We talked to some imams. We talked to some Muslim advocacy organizations. And we really got to hear that perspective of why the Muslim vote matters. What is this election going to change moving forward? How is the scene going to change with whichever party gets elected moving forward? And so next, I guess we can look a little bit into a few more of the stats.
For sure, let's do that right now. So the next area is Don Valley West. The projected victory margin is 4,518. The number of Muslim voters, 8,068.
Yeah, go ahead with Etobicoke next.
Yeah, Etobicoke Center. The projected victory margin is 2,690. The number of Muslim voters, 4,729. Etobicoke North. Projected victory margin, 11,137. Number of Muslim voters, although a lot closer in this writing, is still significant enough to make a change, 11,262. Hamilton, Stony Creek. Projected victory margin, 261. Number of Muslim voters, and this is very powerful, 3,597, almost 3,600 Muslim voters. Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas. Projected victory margin, 261. Again, you could see how big the number of Muslim voters is compared to the margin of victory.
There's a huge difference here.
Again, almost close to 3,600. Canada Carleton, projected victory margin, 402. Number of Muslim voters, 3,626. King Vaughan, projected victory margin, 2,039. Number of Muslim voters, just under 6,000. Kitchener-Conestoga, projected victory margin, 1,434. Number of Muslim voters, 2,756. Kitchener Center. Projected victory margin, 995. Muslim voters, 2,412. And when we started this, I thought that we were going to be getting some sort of mix where there would be, but actually every single one so far, the number of Muslim voters, even in the most closest one, they still outnumbered the projected victory margin.
And it is really amazing to see. And I don't know if this is something that us as a Muslim community, we even, expected to see. So this is really amazing.
Kitchener South, Hespeler, projected victory margin, 818. Number of Muslim voters, 2,756. London North Center, projected victory margin, 1,172. Number of Muslim voters, 2,983. London West, about just over 2,200 is the projected victory margin. Number of Muslim voters, 3,823.
Up here we have up the ongoing statistics from the Canadian press, so we will be following that throughout the night. Now, we talked about the Conservative rally, we talked about the NDP rally, we also got a chance to visit the Liberal rally. So we will be taking a look into that very shortly, and what happened there, and what was the scene like on the ground.
Fantastic to be in Mississauga, this part of Mississauga. I've never been in this part of Mississauga before. But for so many people who come to our country, Mississauga is their first glimpse of Canada. And it is no wonder that so many of them end up staying right here, because Mississauga is the perfect example of what makes Canada so great, what makes Canada strong. Community, diversity, solidarity, and home to 6 amazing Liberal candidates that we need to send to Ottawa. And who's ready to help the Liberal Party win the most consequential election? That makes me feel good. We need you. We need you because President Trump's trade war has literally ruptured the global economy and he has betrayed Canada, America's neighbor, America's closest friend and most steadfast ally. That is what he's done. Now, shame, and this is a tragedy, but it's also our new reality. This is a time for serious leadership. And this is a time
I know we can give each other far more than the Americans can ever take away. I know that as America retreats from the world, Canada will lead it.
So, as you can tell, there was an intervention, there were some protesters, and so you were there on the scene. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was looking like, what happened?
Yeah, so there was somebody there, they were yelling arms embargo now, and the concern here from activists is that although Canada has said that they have stopped issuing new contracts for weapons, there's a few issues with that people are concerned about, which is there are loopholes to the supposed arms embargo. It's first of all, it's not two ways. Second of all, there are still contracts that are open. Third, weapons can go from Canada to the US, and once they go there, there's no way for Canadians or Canada to know where these weapons are ending up. So there are concerns about this, and there is a movement. It's a broad coalition of organizations that have come together to demand that Canada impose a two-way arms embargo. And considering Carney is the Prime Minister right now, they're trying to voice their Canadian-given right to protest, and they're doing that there. They're also asking him or demanding that he call it a genocide. Obviously, the ICJ has said it is a plausible genocide. Many mainstream organizations like Amnesty has said that what's taking place in Gaza is a genocide. So they're asking him to align with international human rights.
So the polls have just closed, and we are going to be now talking to an analyst, Brother Faisal Saeed, and we're going to be asking him a little bit about his thoughts, his reactions, as we enter now this critical phase where we're going to be constantly monitoring what is going to be what is going to be happening next. So thank you so much, brother, for joining us. And we're really honored to have you speak with us today a little bit about what is happening.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for having me on the show. Well, this is a very unique opportunity, a very unique election, not only for Canada, but for the rest of the world, you know. So let me start with Muslims in many Western countries are becoming an integral part of the mainstream, and they are a little portion. But in Canada particularly, they have emerged and continue to emerge as a strong political force. You know, in a few years back, they were less than 2% of the population, but the most recent census shows that they have grown more than 5% of the population in Canada. Compare that to, for example, in US, where Muslims are only just over 1.1% of the population. So as they say, the proverbial strength or the punch that the Muslims are throwing in this election is 5 times stronger than what they had in the US.
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ahmed Ramadan. I'm very glad to have you here. So we were just going through some of the numbers right before you came on, where
Yes.
there are many different ridings across the GTA. Ontario is obviously a battleground for the parties, because where Ontario goes, where British Columbia goes, some of these more populated areas, the election goes. And in every single one of the ridings that we were going through, the margin of victory is smaller than the registered number of Muslim voters. And I wanted to ask you, your thoughts on that.
That's exactly where I was heading to, that the Muslims have a much stronger role to play in this election. And they are not only focused on the local issues in Canada, but they are focused on the international issues like what is happening in Gaza. And this is the first time that the candidates had to align and show what their point of view is on what's happening in Gaza and the humanitarian issues there. And the Muslims are voting according to that.
Yeah, and so some of those things include, one of them being Gaza. Another, issue that we've been constantly hearing from the Muslim community is Islamophobia. And how do you think, what kind of policy changes are you looking to see as, we see the results upcoming? What are some of the things that you think will change?
And just before you answer, brother, I just want to give our viewers an update. Right now, the Liberals are at 28 seats, Conservatives are at 17, and the Bloc Québécois have 6. So please go ahead and answer the question.
Yes. So the Islamophobia has been a concern for past few years, and it has become more center stage since the recent U.S. elections and what is going on in south of the border. As you know, that this morning, President Trump reiterated his threat to challenge the Canadian sovereignty and make it their 51st state. So that creates a concern not only for the sovereignty of Canada, but the Islamophobia that is happening south of the border, how much it will become stronger in Canada. So the Muslims are looking into that.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead,
And
please.
yeah, so we've been talking to voters in the GTA area. We've also been talking to, of course, candidates. And some of the other key issues that these voters are highlighting are the issue of course, the tariffs. Then we have people talking about healthcare, carbon tax. What are some of the other issues you think are pressing to the Muslim community right now?
The biggest issue, local issue that is facing the Muslim community and the Canadians in general is the affordability. Like the prices have continuously been rising for not only for the groceries, but all the other important things for living, and especially concerns with the tariffs being imposed by south of the border. And that is creating these prices to hike up and making life much more less affordable. So how do we make it possible? So Canadians are unified more than any aligning to a specific party, but they are unified who can protect us, our sovereignty, and protect us against these affordability issues that are looming and strengthen our economy.
Yeah, and yeah, go ahead.
So I wanted to get a little bit more specific about the parties and how people have come out to vote. Usually in elections, we see a little bit more diversity in where people vote. Obviously NDP, the Green. This time around, there's been a lot more concentration on the two main parties, and we've been hearing different types of opinions from voters. There's some that are voting liberal, but obviously some are voting against conservatives, so they're voting more strategically. And we wanted to ask you about that. Do you see people, first of all, do you think the liberals have done enough? And second of all, do you think the conservatives really lost an opportunity here, especially when it comes to Gaza?
Certainly. So your question has two parts. First one is that when the election kind of started a while back, there was a lot of focus on liberals. The liberal government has been in power for more than a decade, and the current economic situation and the current immigration situation was focused more on liberal policies. So the conservatives were very, very focused on Trudeau this and Trudeau that. And liberals made a very smart move of Prime Minister Trudeau resigning and bringing in a temporary prime minister calling the elections. And the numbers overnight changed, and people were aligning back under the liberal umbrella. So all the huge lead that conservatives were showing in the polls has been continuously shrinking since then, where the voters are aligning with Mark Carney as a stronger leader and a seasoned economist to lead Canada through this political turmoil as well as the economic situation.
So just to give our viewers an update on where we are standing right now at the elections, Liberals are at 36, Conservatives are at 27, Bloc Québécois is at 12, and the NDP have gotten one seat right now. They're at 1. So my question to you then, do you feel like the support that Mark Carney is getting and the way the polls have swung in his favor is warranted?
It would be, it is yet to be seen if the election voting could actually realize what we have been seeing in the polls, because the polls are answered by people differently, and between them and the polls and the elections, people do change. What we have seen differently this year, this particular election, is that there was an early voting opportunity a week ago, and the Canadians lined up hugely to cast their vote. In fact, on the first day of early polling, we had 7.3 million votes being cast, which is the highest record in Canada ever for early polls. So this shows the engagement voters have for this election and to express their opinion.
is there now, as the polls have closed, is there any final remarks that you have, any thoughts that you want to share with the Muslim community as this race comes to an end?
Well, the Muslim community has done the best that they could do during the early polls as well as today. We had people waiting in lines at different polling stations trying to cast their vote, which is very, very important. The Muslims have a very strong representation in the overall Canadian population, and they needed to come out and vote, which they have done so. Now, in the next couple of hours, we have to see how that realizes and what the next 4 years will hold for the Canadians and the Muslims in Canada.
Thank you so much for taking out the time to be here with us today, to share your insight, and we look forward to seeing what comes next for over the next few hours.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum.
So right now we're just gonna discuss a little bit. We're gonna go through some of the news, but I wanted to give an update before we do that. Liberals are at 41. Liberals are actually at 44. Conservatives are at 34. Bloc Québécois is at 12, and the NDP has doubled their seats to 2.
All right, so we are now going to bring you live updates as the ballots are closing, with results coming out from Atlantic Canada. The Conservatives bag a Liberal seat in Newfoundland, and projections show that the Conservatives will be winning in a riding in Newfoundland's Long-Range Mountains. The seat has previously been held by the Liberals. So if a similar trend occurs from coast to coast, it could signal a stronger voter turnout, potentially defying previous polls. However, it is still early in the count and the results can still sway left to right. At this time of the broadcast, the Liberals are leading with 9 projected seats, while the Conservatives have secured 3. And so all ballots in the Canadian federal election are counted by hand under the supervision of election officials and party representatives. So votes cast on election day are tallied at local polling stations, while advanced and local mail-in ballots are counted at district offices. Special ballots, like those from the military, inmates, or Canadians abroad, are processed at a central facility in Ottawa. So with counting permitted up to 14 days early. But results are kept secret until the polls close.
So the next government could be decided before the polls even close in British Columbia. Polls showed Singh in 3rd place in the riding leading up to the election day, falling well behind Liberal candidate Wei Lin Chang. Chang is a new candidate who's not very well known. Chang was acclaimed in the riding. Singh isn't expected to speak until the polls close at 7 p.m. Vancouver time.
So as of now, Liberals are leading with 49 seats, and the Conservatives have bagged 38. And in New Brunswick, Liberals have bagged 4, while Conservatives have been elected in 3 ridings. And Dominic LeBlanc, Minister of International Trade and Intergovernmental Affairs, is projected to be re-elected in his Beaujoire riding in New Brunswick. And in the Prince Edward Island, Liberals have been elected in 3 ridings. Now, we also have projections from British Columbia. So the next government, yeah. So
I think we're ready for our next segment.
So next up, we are going to be, well, before we go into our next segment, I think that we should take a minute to talk about what is going to be happening after the election. As GTA Muslims today, what are we looking at, starting tomorrow and post-elections? What are some of the things we're going to be covering, and what are you excited to cover?
Honestly, I'm most excited to cover the different parks and different activities that there are to do around the city. I have 2 young daughters, Nadia and Dahlia, 2 beautiful girls, and they love going to the park in the summertime. So I'm very excited to look around, find some nice spots to take them, and have a very fun-filled summer.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that this summer, there's going to be a lot happening around the GTA as usual. Just off the top of my mind, I know that in many parts in the GTA, it's cherry blossom season and people are going out, people are taking pictures, people are really enjoying this beautiful weather. So as we look back at the race, what are we looking at now? Has there been any changes since then?
Yeah, the Liberals are at 54 seats. The Conservatives are at 40. Bloc Québécois at 11. And NDP has actually gone down from 2 to 1. As these, the numbers come in, sometimes they do switch over. But in general, these numbers are pretty good. These early results primarily reflect counts from Atlantic Canada and parts of Quebec, and the early returns from Ontario. The Liberals' lead aligns with pre-election expectations in Atlantic Canada and parts of urban Ontario, suggesting they are holding their traditional strongholds. The Conservatives are showing strong early performances, especially where suburban ridings are starting to report. The Bloc Québécois, now at 10 seats, is confirming its continued resilience in Quebec. Meanwhile, the NDP, with just 1, is tracking behind expectations, and the Greens have yet to win any seats. It's important to note that these are still early. There are much more results and ridings yet to be tallied, but these are just kind of our early analysis of, a snapshot of where we are right now.
Thank you so much for taking us through this. We will now be taking a short break, and we will resume in just a few minutes.
In 2025, Canada heads to the polls, and the voices of GTA Muslims matter more than ever. We're the fastest growing population in the Greater Toronto Area, and we're bringing our values, concerns, and hopes to the ballot box. From global justice to local struggles, housing, Islamophobia, foreign policy, the issues affecting Muslims are on the front lines. Introducing GTA Muslims Today, your go-to source for exclusive federal election 2025 coverage. Watch GTA Muslims Today, only on Muslim Network TV.
All right, welcome back. So we will be now taking another quick look at the race and what are we looking at now?
Well, right now, the Liberals are at 63 seats, Conservatives at 47, the Bloc Québécois is at 10, NDP is still at 1, and the Greens have yet to secure a seat.
All right, and so now we will be talking to another analyst who will be taking a look at what is it looking like right now. And so why don't you introduce our next guest?
So Brother Taha Ghayur is the Executive Director of Justice for All Canada. Brother Taha, thank you for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Assalamu alaikum. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, we have spoken before, but what is your view, what is your feeling this election and how Muslims have taken voting? Do you feel like Muslims have taken voting seriously this election? Do you see a lot more engagement, a lot more turnout?
Well, thank you for that question. I would say, firstly, definitely Muslim community and Muslim leadership as a whole definitely has taken it much more seriously. We have seen much more mobilization. We have seen a lot more organization. We have seen a lot more grassroots getting the vote out, campaigns. All of that is very, very encouraging. I would say, of course, Gaza and foreign policy is at the center of a lot of that mobilizing. That being said, I will say that, and this may be an unpopular thing to say, and I think results will, I think it will be clear after, post-election, essentially, when we do more of that analysis. But I do believe that a lot of the mobilizing resonated with younger folks, not necessarily with older folks in our community. And definitely those who care about global issues, maybe those who are more practicing, they're the ones who I think are the ones who really are moving to action and voting, and hopefully they came out voting in droves today. But that being said, anecdotally, what I've heard from several people who are involved in campaigning, that in early polls and early voting, we did not necessarily see the kind of Muslim response as we would have loved to. So we are hoping and banking on, of course, today and the fact that everybody who did not come out to vote did come out today, especially those who resonated with this united message around taking action because of injustice around the world.
You mentioned that that the polls were not, advanced polling was not showing, we didn't have that Muslim turnout that we, I guess, should have had. Can you tell us a little bit about why you think that is?
A lot has to do with the fact that, most people think, well, we have enough time to vote and, I'll wait till the end kind of thing. But it also has to do with, and again, anecdotally, among the various advocates and, grassroots organizations who are working on getting the vote out, they also believe has to do with the fact that a lot of Muslims this time around are really split on which way to vote, not necessarily vote splitting necessarily. And what I mean by that is that they were not fully sure yet until sort of this weekend, and they were really making up their minds. And many of them, finally have decided, okay, they're going to go this way or that way. Our community, of course, is not a monolith, and we understand there's a lot of diversity of opinions, but there is a lot of galvanizing now towards voting for one party or the other. And the whole idea, of course, comes down to whether you want to vote strategically to ensure that a party that is very much pro-genocide and genocide sympathizing party does not get elected, that being a top priority, versus voting based on your principles, based on the past record, essentially. Those who stood on the right side of history, you want to reward those. So my understanding is that a lot had to do with the fact that people really were trying to make up their minds. And I think by now they have. And I really hope we will see the answer tonight, and we will see something in resounding numbers and record numbers, Muslims coming out to really, really use the tool of justice, as we call it.
So just to give our viewers an update before we continue the interview, the Liberals currently are at 81 seats. The Conservatives are at 56. Bloc Québécois at 11. NDP is at 1. Something that you said and we've talked about is Muslims have a very powerful voice. We went through some graphics earlier, and the margins of victory are many, many different ridings, much smaller than the registered number of Muslim voters in those ridings. So they have the power to swing elections, if they choose to.
100%. And I think, it is said anywhere from 60 to 80% 60 to 80 ridings across Canada have that potential of Muslims swinging votes. And if, of course, we decide to come out and vote, which I hope we did tonight.
Especially in a place like Ontario, which is a major battleground for the parties. They're all trying to win votes here, and Muslims are concentrated, obviously, very much in Ontario. We were going through some of the numbers earlier. Around Mississauga Centre is 20% Muslim. Which riding you said was 25?
Yeah, we were in Mississauga Erin Mills.
That's 25%. Milton is 30%. So Muslims are very concentrated in these very important and critical areas. I also wanted to ask you, I know Justice for All put out a report card to help guide people and just give them an idea of where the parties stand on different international human rights issues. Can you please talk about that?
Yes, the purpose of that report card, or those report cards, 5 report cards, was to really help not just Canadian Muslims, but Canadians of conscience really understand and see for themselves where on policy issues related to global human rights do all these 5 key parties stand. So what we laid out was really factual, really analysis of where do all these 5 parties stand on 5 human rights issues, and under each of these 5 human rights issues, 5 specific policy issues that they've either fared, how they fared, or how they failed. And what is interesting about that analysis is that it really shows that how selective each party is when it comes to human rights, and how we pick and choose based on our either ideological leanings or convenience. And this is, unfortunately, we have seen this across the parties when it comes to, especially on Palestine. But we have also seen, Ukraine versus other human rights. So, give you an example: a party that is openly, essentially, systemically calling for and legislating racist bills like Bill 21 in Quebec is quite pro-Palestine, or at least has been on paper for the last few months, versus, for instance, a party that is openly pro-Israel, pro-genocide, you can say in many ways, has been the champion of Uyghur cause and Uyghur genocide, anti-Uyghur genocide, for instance. We have seen, of course, similar hypocrisy play out when it comes to Ukraine versus Palestine, and so on. So we broke it down into, we focus on Muslims, Christians, and Dalits and Sikhs in India, for instance. That's one report card. Another one on Uyghur genocide. Another one on Rohingya genocide, and of course Palestine and indigenous peoples in Canada, whom we also need to actually highlight, simply because we cannot talk about global human rights atrocities while we have a legacy of genocide that continues to impact indigenous peoples right here, while we are also advocating for indigenous peoples around the world. And so this election, of course, won't be necessarily defined only by global atrocities, and especially Gaza, but we truly believe that this election will send a very, very strong message to all parties that if you continue to support genocidal policies globally, that you are going to suffer one way or the other.
Can you expand a little bit on what are some of the policies that you want to see, under the new and upcoming government?
Regardless of course, which party, which way elections swing, and which party ends up being a party that takes the leadership of this country, we want to make sure that Canada centers international law and international human rights law, and humanitarian law as part of its mandate going forward. We want to make sure that Canada abides by its own principles of international law and its own principles of justice that it has purported to all these over the years of supporting peace and justice around the world. So that being said, whether it's Palestine or Uyghurs or Rohingyas or Muslims of India, or even non-minority issues like, for instance, what's happening in Sudan and Yemen and other places, we want to make sure that Canada, stands on the right side of history. So in terms of policy, ensuring that Canada's foreign policy aligns with its ideals of peace and justice and international law, and number two, that our funding and our aid continues, if not increases, when it comes to such humanitarian disasters, and that number three, that our defense budget and our defense essentially does not in any way involve procurement of our sales and procurement of our arms should never ever be linked to any genocidal countries or genocidal policies around the world. And these are like some basic things, fundamental things that we want to make sure that we abide by.
Brother Taha Gayoor, Executive Director of Justice for All Canada, thank you for joining us and for your analysis. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So just to give our viewers a quick update at where we're at, Liberals are at 95, Conservatives are at 72, Bloc Québécois at 14. NDP is still holding 1 seat. We are now going to go to an interview that we did with a community organizer and an educator, Aisha. Assalamu alaikum. I am Ahmed Ramadan for Muslim Network TV, and this is GTA Muslims Today. I'm standing here with Aisha, who is a volunteer and a community member and has been working this election cycle. Aisha, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So my first question to you is, what is the most important issue for you this election?
The most important issue for me is Palestine. That is not only because I care deeply about the people in Palestine, but I also believe it's a litmus test today in Canada to see who is pro-fascism and who is pro-democracy. So when we are taking away our rights to free speech here, using Palestine as a Trojan horse, everyone loses their rights to free speech. When we demolish international collaboration to protect borders of nation states, then we cannot expect the world to come to protect Canada's border if Donald Trump invades. So I believe that Palestine is showing us the weakness of our democracy in every area, and we can really consolidate around this issue to protect the nation of Canada as a democratic state.
Do you feel like Canada has done enough?
No, I don't feel that Canada has done enough. I think that not only have they not done enough, but they are actually actively supporting some of these measures like bubble bylaws that prevent us from protesting. I'm an academic, and at the university, I've seen lots of students and academics lose their positions and jobs for advocacy. And I think that the question of arms embargo is crucial. So when a Canadian politician says, I support a ceasefire, but they don't give us a plan for how they're going to get that ceasefire, it's like saying, I support affordable housing, but I have no plan. So we suggest arms embargo, and the fake arms embargo right now, they only canceled 12% of the existing permits to send weapons directly to Israel, but meanwhile, the vast majority of Canadian weapons that end up in Israel go through the United States with no requirements of permitting or tracking. So I think it's this obfuscation of the reality that lets the Canadian politicians speak out of both sides of their mouth and really take no action. So I demand that we take an arms embargo to the full extent of our obligations under international law, and after that we can start talking about doing enough.
So I know you're an organizer and you've been working with Vote Palestine. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how organizations have come together to kind of force politicians and candidates on a platform?
Yeah, so I'm a volunteer. I'm literally just a community member who heard about the Vote Palestine platform and started going out on my own to tell my fellow community members about it. I think education is the only way to democracy and to mobilize our collective power. Vote Palestine is a way to force the politicians to answer our questions about Palestine. Because if they don't answer our questions, how can we choose who to vote for when we don't even know the differences between their positions? So Vote Palestine has articulated 5 demands. Arms embargo to protect and provide aid to Gaza, to protect free speech in Canada on Palestine, and to combat anti-Palestinian racism, to end Canadian involvement in illegal settlements. Yeah, the 5th one, and to recognize the Palestinian state, which France has said they will do in June, Ireland and Spain have already done, but Mark Carney has said he will not do in June. So these are the demands, and we're just trying to get every politician to tell us yes or no to each demand, so that before we vote, we know what their positions are. And we have also gotten voters to send an email called The Pledge that emails all the candidates in all the parties to say that their vote will only go to candidates who agree to our demands. And that means we can take candidates from the NDP, from the Liberals and the Conservatives, and we can support them in different ridings so that in the Parliament we can have a cross-party coalition that will vote for human rights in Palestine. So if anybody wants to find out more, please go to votepalestine.ca and you will find a list of 800 candidates across Canada who have agreed to our demands. You put your postal code and you find out in your riding which politicians have agreed to our demands.
My last question to you is, there are some Canadians that say, what does it matter what's going on in Palestine? And I know you touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to make the question a little bit more straightforward. They say, what does it matter what's going on in Palestine? We are Canadians. We should be worried about only Canadian issues.
Well, I would ask, what does it mean to be Canadian? I'll tell you, I think about Canada as somewhere where multiculturalism and the respect for all humanity is held up here. My parents met in a high school in Toronto. My mother is Jewish from Montreal. My father is Muslim from Egypt. That is a sign of how Canada is all about the international collective of people, right? Like, we have people in Canada from across the world, and we also have traditionally been peacekeepers and stood up for international democratic institutions. Canada is a founding member of the ICC, the International Criminal Court. And yet, why is it that we're not definitely saying, oh, we will enforce the arrest warrant for Netanyahu, right, the way Spain has? So I think that if we want to continue to exist as the Canada that we know, with free speech, with an international role upholding international law and human rights, and with multiculturalism and respect for all peoples, then that Canada only exists if we fight for it and struggle for it and choose to vote for that, and not to vote for the fascism, the wave of fascism coming from the United States. It will not stop at the border between the United States and Canada if we don't hold it back. That's what I believe.
Aisha, I believe that we need to have another interview a little bit more in depth, and we could really dig into some of these topics. But I really appreciate your time right now. I know you've been very busy, so really appreciate it. So obviously that was not a live interview since I'm in studio right now. But you know, the interesting about this interview is that she highlights why the Palestine issue is important to Canadians. Obviously, there's freedom of speech, there's anti-Palestinian racism, and you know what happens sometimes overseas gets reflected in our own communities, and it's something that people really care about. And as Canadians, you know, we want to make sure that Canada itself is aligned with international law and not held complicit in war crimes.
And it's amazing to see how this issue brought the entire Muslim community together, especially at a crucial time like this when the vote matters.
And I would add to that, not just the Muslim community, but actually a very broad coalition from all walks of life that have really taken up this cause and see that this deserves that sort of attention.
And she mentioned the Vote Palestine. And I think that page, that portal really helps people gauge and get a good idea of where they're putting their vote and how they're voting. And as we now take another look at the projected numbers on the Canadian press, we are looking at 128 seats for the Liberals, 89 for the Conservatives, 16 for the Bloc Québécois, and we are looking at 2 for the NDP. That just dropped. We will now be taking a short break, so stay tuned. We will be back in just a few minutes. Going to be linking to next.
This guy Kamil Ismail is all over. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. So I want our viewers to know that the numbers we're giving you are projected seats. And although for the most part they do hold up, that's why we see sometimes a slight change in the numbers, whether they drop or go up. NDP was sitting at 4, they went back down to 2. Right now we're sitting at 128 seats that are projected. I mean, there's 104 are secure, but there's another 24 that are expected. So we'll just give you the overall numbers: 128 for the Liberals, 89 for the Conservatives, 16 for the Bloc Québécois, and 2 for the NDP.
And we're continuing to see these numbers rise and drop really fast. And we're gonna on the screen, you can see once again, we're going to be going through some of the projected victory margins and the number of Muslim voters. And so we looked at Brampton East, we looked at how the projected victory margin is 914, and what we have is, and the number of Muslim voters is 6,195. So once again, you can clearly see. And then again, we have in Brampton Center, we have the projected victory margin at 2,145, and we have the number of Muslim voters at 6,085.
It's been pretty interesting to see how the night has been unfolding so far. You could, we had record turnout for the pre-election, which broke all sorts of records for pre-voting numbers. And, I'm personally very curious to see how the night is going to unfold.
We had some over the last few weeks, we've kind of seen how voters have overall made their decisions. We started off with looking at people at voters, for example, in Streetsville, Mississauga. We asked them, what are some of the key issues that you are thinking about right now when you go out to vote? We heard about issues such as carbon tax, such as healthcare, such as tariffs, and of course, one of the most pressing issues being Islamophobia. We also asked several candidates about what are you going to be doing about Islamophobia in Canada, as that is one of the key issues that many, many voters across the GTA have been mentioning. And so we were able to talk to candidates from several different ridings, including right here in Mississauga City Centre, in Cooksville, in Erin Mills, Mississauga. And we're able to get many different perspectives on those issues, especially from, like Liberal, NDP, and Green Party candidates.
So I just want to talk a little bit about the numbers. We talked a little bit earlier about Atlantic Canada. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the other ridings and the other seats that have come in. So for our viewers, just a reminder, in Canada, you need 172 seats for a majority. Currently, the Liberals sit at 134, Conservatives at 93, Bloc Québécois at 17, and the NDP have 3. The Liberals under Mark Carney have jumped out to a commanding lead. The Conservatives, led by Poilievre, obviously. So let's start here. The strong Liberal performance in Ontario, particularly in the GTA and suburban regions, are driving much of their seat count so far. The Conservatives are still competitive in parts of Ontario and are expected to make stronger gains as Western results roll in, but they are facing a steep climb to catch up because obviously they're 135 now. So they're just about 40 seats away from claiming that majority. And turnout in key urban and suburban ridings has been reported as high and continuing to favor the Liberal advantage.
Yeah, so we are going to also get a chance later today to talk to some more analysts, to talk to some more people who are active in the Muslim community and in the community as a whole, and ask them a little bit about some of the key issues key things that we are seeing across the board, such as Islamophobia, such as inclusivity, such as and the difference between what we've been previously seeing, but also what we want to see in the future. What is going to be happening next? What should the Muslim community be looking out for next? What changes are coming up?
So, obviously Gaza is a very important issue, but there are other, very dire, critical situations around the world, one of them being Sudan.
Yes, and so we are going to get a chance to hear from a brother, Mamoon Hassan, from the Muslim community, a leader in our community. We are going to be taking a look at what he has to say about this crisis and what the Muslim community has to say about it.
I think the same thing as I think a lot of Muslims are thinking at the same time, at this time right now actually. I'm quite concerned about a lot of issues that are happening in Canada. I'll be really frank with you. I think that Muslims are starting to think very differently about Canada for the past couple of years. So this election is quite important for us. I mean, obviously, number one is Islamophobia. I don't want to say Muslims are fearful, but I can say personally, I am concerned. I'm quite concerned. I'm worried for my children. I'm worried for my daughters. I'm worried for my wife. I'm worried for my sisters in the community. They're the visible Muslims. They're the ones who oftentimes are the ones dealing with Islamophobia from I guess really the physical perspective of it. They're the ones who are, visible and seeing things, and we're seeing the attacks that they themselves are going through. That's the first thing. The second thing is, obviously, I'm quite concerned with Canada's foreign policy towards Muslims all around the world. I'm really, really concerned with that. Canada used to be a completely different country when we came here. But now that we are no longer coming here, and now we are actually a part of Canada itself, I'm seeing that Canada is just moving in a completely different direction than we are hoping for. I'm disappointed. I'll be really honest. I'm quite disappointed on how Canada has been dealing with issues that are really, really important to the Sudanese community, specifically to the Muslim community as a general. I hear a lot of talk. We've been sold a lot of rhetoric. There's no action. We haven't seen it at all. I don't know if you want me to speak specifics or not, but when it comes to the actual Sudanese crisis that has happened, it's the most largest, I want to call it crisis in the world right now, with more than 13 million displaced refugees. That is much larger than the Ukrainian crisis, which is, that is what we hear about. Rightfully so. We should be talking about that as well. But the double standards are quite deafening. They're really, really problematic for us. We have been asking the Canadian government to help us from a political perspective. And from politician after politician, we've heard the words really loud and clear, no, because you don't have the political push as the other countries. It was very, very clear. It wasn't even something that they actually tried to hide. They said to us, there's just not much we can do because we just don't have the political clout at this time. At the same time, we see the programs that Canada itself has actually announced, the reunification, the family reunification program for us. They refuse the whole idea of refugees. So they're saying, here's what we'll do is we'll allow you to bring Sudanese who have family members in Canada, bring them here. But it's been 3 years. The war has literally ended, and there has not been one person who's actually come here as a part of that community so far. We've spoken to the news, we've spoken to, and again, what we keep hearing, we're being sold lies after lies after lies. And not just from one party. I'll be really honest as well. I don't want to say it's just the Liberal government. Even the Conservatives are not doing much about it. And the NDP is also not doing much about it because I don't think, I don't know how much you have time for this, but if I want to analyze this, I just know the fact that there is no real value to us in terms of numbers, in terms of finances, in terms of all this. And then the question comes all of the time, is Canada going to be a principled country that's based on values, or is it just going to be a country that's based on values, money-wise, numbers, and all of these kinds of ways? And that's a very, very, very obvious hypocrisy that's happening. I think everybody should vote their conscience. I'm all about punishing the Liberals for ignoring our brothers and sisters in Gaza. But I am also really concerned with the consequences of that. We may be powerful enough to punish the government itself. I'm just not certain that we're capable of handling the consequences of that punishment. It's a dilemma in my mind. I don't know who to vote for personally. I know who to vote for. I'm just not sure the consequences of voting for that person are going to be satisfying enough for me.
So Brother Marmoon discussed the issue of the dire situation that is happening in Sudan, along with, of course, the genocide happening in Gaza. So overall, we've heard a lot throughout the day. We've heard a lot of interviews, a lot of sound bites, a lot of things from the Liberal candidates, from the NDP candidates, from the Green Party candidates. We didn't get as many from the Conservative candidates. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about what is maybe the results of that?
So, I want our viewers to know that this was not because we are trying to push one party over another. We are really, we reached out to everybody. We were trying to get as many candidates as we possibly can in every riding. And it just so happened that Conservatives, declined our offer to interview them and present their case to the Muslim community. And, this is for our viewers to know, so they understand that we are trying to give you coverage from all across the board. We wanted you to make an informed decision about your election tonight. Now, I wanted to discuss this, maybe just make the story a little bit bigger. The Conservatives were leading and pretty heavily early on, but a few factors contributed, and we discussed this a little bit in our earlier broadcast. What happened to take the Conservatives from such almost a foregone conclusion that they were going to win the election to where they are now? And just to give our viewers an update before we get into a little bit of the analysis of why there was such a drop, the Liberals right now at 148 seats, Conservatives at 105, Bloc Québécois at 21, and the NDP has gone up to 7. So there's a few factors that contributed to why the Conservatives have dropped. Number one, the stepping down of Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney stepping in. He was seen a lot more as a calm, mature voice in the room, where a lot of the attacks or the labels that were put on Poilievre early on was not really taken seriously by swing voters. But as the election started coming near and people started getting more invested in it, they were not really interested in voting for somebody, or at least that's what the polls are showing, voting for somebody that seemed a lot more chaotic and a little bit more of a loose cannon.
Yeah, and you have visited and talked to voters from all across the GTA. What are some of their reactions when it comes to Liberals versus Conservatives? What are the thoughts of people, maybe even specifically Muslims across the GTA?
Well, we've heard from some of our guests that they're not really so happy with the Liberal Party, and but because of sort of the rhetoric that has come out from the Conservative side and from Poilievre, they're choosing to vote more against the Conservatives than with the Liberals in that way. So early on, Poilievre really tried to remain neutral, especially on Gaza, and wasn't saying a lot. But at some point, he took a very hard pro-Israeli stance. And, as we had been discussing throughout the day, Muslims make up a pretty significant voter group in very powerful and battleground ridings. And, this is another area that's affected the Conservative drop.
And so I think it's going to be really important for us to hear from a few more of our leaders in the Muslim community. And we are actually very honored to have with us today Imam Sikandar Hashmi. And so Imam Sikandar is the executive director of the Canadian Council of Imams. He is a community builder, a teacher, a fundraiser, a writer, and he is based in Ottawa, Ontario. So Imam Sikandar, we are very honored to have you on here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, assalamu alaikum. Good evening.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So to start things off, how are you feeling about the results so far?
So yeah, it's an exciting night for anyone who's into politics. I've been an acute political observer since I was a kid, since about 6 years old. And actually tonight I'm outside in downtown Ottawa, just across the Rideau Canal from the Rogers Convention Center, Ottawa, that you can see right behind me. That's where the Conservative election party is happening, and Pierre Poilievre is expected to show up tonight. I can only imagine what the mood is like inside the building, probably very somber, since some of the media outlets have started projecting a liberal win. And I think that that mood inside that building, which I assume what the mood is right now, it's probably the opposite for the much of the country and for many members of the Muslim community, who are probably letting out a sigh of relief. And it's actually quite unfortunate that the Conservative Party, in my view, has once again finding itself in this situation, and having a disappointing loss. Of course, the results are still coming in, and polls are just about to close on the West Coast now in a few minutes. So, of course, we'll be looking forward to those results as well. But I think what people need to understand is that it doesn't need to be this way, right? The fact that the Conservative Party has consecutive losses in multiple elections in 2019, 2021, and most probably now in 2025, is not something that that needs to happen. And as far as the Muslim community is concerned, and by the way, I'm totally nonpartisan. So I work with all political leaders in my position as an imam and a community leader, and I speak to everyone. And one of the things that I think we need to make clear to conservative candidates of the Conservative Party is that one of the main reasons that they have received so much opposition from the Muslim community is primarily because of two main reasons. So number one is being soft on Islamophobia, and number two, for their lack of balance when it comes to the situation in the Middle East, and particularly in Palestine. They've chosen to take an extremely hardline position when it comes to Israel, when it comes to the conflict. And unfortunately for them, it seems that it's going to cost them another election.
Imam Sikandar, assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining us. Just before we continue, and I have some questions I want to follow up with you, and we also have a few more guests that we're going to add on. But I just wanted to give our viewers an update on where we are on the elections. The Liberals at our 150 seats, Conservatives at our 118 seats, Bloc Québécois at 23, and the NDP's at 5. And a reminder to our viewers, you need 172 seats for a majority.
So we are also very honored to be joined by Sister Rabia Khidr. Sister Rabia is somebody who is dedicated to equity and justice and for people who are differently abled, women, and diverse communities. We are also here with Brother Firas. And Brother Firas is a motivational speaker. He is a khatib, a coach, and he is a very active community member. We also are here with Brother Yasser. Brother Yasser Hadara has served as a community leader for over 2 decades, establishing some of the most important institutions in Canada. Thank you once again, all of you, for being here today, for taking your time out to share a little bit of your thoughts on what is currently happening and what the elections are looking like right now. So to start off, I think I will also just give you each a chance to share with us your reactions to what the polls are looking like right now. What do you think about the results that we're seeing so far? Sister Rabia, if you would like to start us off.
So I think you're on mute because we cannot hear you. Brother Firas, maybe we could start with you until she gets her mic back on.
Absolutely. Okay, Jazakumullah khair for this great effort. Jazakumullah khair for having me on the show. It was very obvious to all of us that the leader of the Conservative Party decided to go to the extreme right, which did not resonate well with Canadians. And it's not only about the extreme right, but having Mark Carney coming in with his solid experience in economy and comparing him to Pierre. I remember most of the attacks from Carney on Pierre were accusing him of being a career politician and never holding a job in a private sector. So I think that was a very, very smart attack from Carney on Pierre, showing him as a person that never worked in a private sector, never held a real job like all Canadians, kind of discredit Pierre, and on the other hand, showed Carney as an expert on the most important issue for all Canadians, which is economy, the economic independence from the US. And I always say maybe one of the most important moves that Carney made was bringing in John Chrétien to the victory speech, because John Chrétien is known for his position or for his achievements on making Canada a sovereign, independent nation, especially from the US. It was more to the center on its policies, more independent, more sovereign. The books were balanced, economy was great at his time. So that was a clear message from Carney that he will continue. And he also said it. He said that I'm inspired by John Chrétien. So it showed that he had that in mind. He's the one to put Canada back on the right track when it comes to economy and everything surrounds it, affordability and prices and what have you, and attacking Pierre as being a career politician, never held a job in a private sector. That, I guess, drew the attention of all Canadians that we see the reflection of it happening tonight.
So earlier today, we had on a guest, Mohamed Faqih, who also mentioned Jean Chrétien and how he refused to join the U.S. war against Iraq. And I think that goes along with what you're saying also.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask, we could look at this maybe as a panel, and we can have some discussion around this, but do you believe, and I think you've already highlighted this a little bit, but do you believe that the Conservatives really missed out on an opportunity here for them to make some gains in the Muslim community
Big time.
instead of the Liberals?
Big time, big time. We've worked so hard since the leadership race of the Conservative Party in 2022. We worked so hard to build bridges. A lot of brothers and sisters within the party and outside the party, a lot of activists worked so hard to build those bridges. And as we were getting really close to having a good partnership, subhanallah, I even remember in June of 2023, I led a delegation from the Canadian Council of Imams to the federal parliament in Ottawa, where we met with the Conservative caucus, and it was a very positive meeting. It was the first time for me, and I've been involved in politics for almost 20 years now, since 2005. I've never seen the Conservatives so interested in talking to the Muslim community like I saw in summer of 2023. And we saw that clearly with Pierre's statements and visits to masajid across the GTA and across Canada. We saw him at ISNA, we saw him elsewhere. And unfortunately, after October 7th, everything took a sharp turn and things start collapsing again. So unfortunately, and I said that to many of the friends that we made in the Conservative Party, please do not destroy this relationship. Please do not burn all the bridges. But unfortunately, he decided to go to an extreme on the issue of Palestine and what's happening in Gaza. And he ended up indeed burning all the bridges that were built by a group of activists that worked on this issue, and we see where he's standing right now. I can't hear.
Sorry, we didn't hear anything, I don't think.
Over to Sister Rabia. What are your thoughts on what is currently happening in front of us right now as the results are coming in? please do share some of your thoughts with us.
So can you guys hear me this time?
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay, awesome. Well, all I can tell you is this whole weekend I've been reflecting on 10 years ago, the election of 2015, when, you know, when the Conservatives were in power, they were going in as incumbents, but the style of campaigning, the negative politics was prevailing, and Muslims were villainized. In fact, Muslim women were villainized by that particular government, that administration, in terms of the Barbaric Practices Act, in terms of the niqab ban. They were just flaming political rhetoric, feeding Islamophobia in this country. And since then, we've seen a rise in anti-Muslim sentiment and hate crimes, and crimes that we could never imagine on Canadian soil, like 6 men being shot dead in a mosque, our London family being run over in London, Ontario, to name a few headline issues, and numerous incidents of assault and hijab pullings and so on and so forth. So I said back then on October 19th, 2015, I feel like I hope I can breathe. And as the results came in, I felt I could. Now, again, we were here once again. That negativity, that villainizing, that really, really, I'm nonpartisan. let me start with that as well. I work with everybody that will work on the issues that I advance, particularly around equity, disability, justice, etc. And I have met with several MPs, cabinet ministers, even the last prime minister, parliamentary secretaries from all and MPs from all parties and all sides of the Senate. So I do go at this from a nonpartisan perspective, but as I said, somebody who's championed human rights and equity, having served as a commissioner with the Ontario Human Rights Commission, etc., I am very, very disappointed with the tone and practice that our political campaigns seem to take when it comes to a particular party choosing to villainize Muslims. And for what? Just to radicalize the extreme right and gain popular support? Well, I'm glad that we voted somebody off the island, as I was reflecting today, off of this part of Turtle Island. So, you know, they need to learn a lesson, and I hope they receive that message loud and clear. And it's not just the Muslim community, it's the values that we share broadly as Canadians, as Canadian Muslims, as everyday Canadians who care about an inclusive society that welcomes everyone, that is built on the shoulders of many, many, many diverse communities, and of course, our Indigenous sisters and brothers. So I am really glad that Canadians have sent a loud, clear message, doing their democratic duty through voting, to say to Ottawa, to send people to Ottawa who will uphold true Canadian values. We often find it very difficult to identify what those values are, but they are understood. And those values are of being fair, being just, being inclusive, respecting diversity, appreciating the plurality of our society.
So I just want to hop in here and give our viewers an update on what's going on, and then we want to take the snapshot and maybe ask some reflection on this. Right now, the Liberals are at 156 seats. The Conservatives are at 131 seats. Bloc Québécois at 22, and NDP are at 7. CBC is projecting already a Liberal government. Obviously, for a majority government, you need 172 seats. Sakina?
Yeah, so based on that, Brother Yasser, thank you so much for being here with us. Can you share a little bit of your thoughts now that we know a little bit of where this is heading?
Sure. So thank you very much, first of all, for doing this coverage, and thank you for having me on. I actually, my view on this is that as a Muslim community, we have to look at this in a longer term lens, and we should worry primarily about what we can accomplish, the things that are within our control. And I'm going to apologize for the background noise. I'm in Hamilton Center with Matthew Green's campaign. But I think what we have achieved this election has been remarkable because Muslim organizations got together and our Muslim community got together and we forced our issues onto the political map. We forced our issues onto the agenda. And this is something that can only continue to grow and can position our community in a better light and in a better place to help build this country and to help take this country in a direction that is moral and that upholds justice. It's a sigh of relief, obviously, for many of us that we're looking at what the polls predicted, which is a liberal government. And so we have that kind of safety net, but I think it's been more important than getting that safety net. It has been more important that our community has stepped up and that we put our concerns regarding Islamophobia, our concerns regarding anti-Palestinian racism, our concerns regarding freedom of expression, and most importantly, our concerns regarding what is happening to our brothers and sisters in Gaza. We put all of that on the map and we forced candidates across the spectrum to deal with it.
And thank you so much for sharing that. And Imam Sikandar, if we can go back to you for a minute and just I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things that, your expectations of, the upcoming government in fighting Islamophobia, what have we seen in the past and what do you hope to see in the future?
That's a great question. I mean, I think a lot of it depends, as I'm looking at the numbers and the projections, whether this is a minority government or a majority liberal government. I think if it's a minority, from a political standpoint, they have to be a bit more careful, of course, because the government could be brought down at any time. I think that could potentially impact things, unfortunately, like anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia as well, and of course the Canada's position with regards to the war in Gaza. At the same time, I mean, I think moving forward, we would expect this government hopefully to not be as performative as the previous one. I think the fact that the previous prime minister was a drama teacher, was very good at performances. Not to say that pass judgment on his character necessarily, but just that that seemed to be something that played heavily into the way that the government and the country was led. And perhaps now with a different face, with a different prime minister, someone who has a different type of experience, especially on the international stage, perhaps that will bring hopefully a different approach, one that is more meaningful, one that is more substantive, so that there's not so much focus just on how things look and how they land, but rather how much substance they actually have in terms of bringing meaningful and positive change that not only the Muslim community in Canada is looking for, but indeed all Canadians are looking for across this country.
And Sister Rabia, I want to, ask you a very similar question. What do you think will happen differently this time around in regards to disability rights and inclusion? What have we seen in the past, and what do you hope to see in the future?
Well, again, we've worked with all parliamentarians the last 4 years working through a piece of legislation for the Canada Disability Benefit, and we saw incredible cooperation. So we know that when we appeal to the values of politicians, when they hear from their constituents, they tend to really put partisanship aside and come together to make good policy. So we know that that is actually possible. Although the legislation stands and the budget isn't meeting our expectations, there's a lot of work to do. We have our Better the Benefit campaign running. We will be working throughout the coming months to reconnect with existing relationships in Ottawa, build some new ones, and keep asking for what we need. And we're hoping that that spirit of cooperation continues, because disabled people in this country are 27% of the population, and about 1.6 million of them live in poverty and deep poverty. So we are working across provinces and with the federal government, and that work will continue. So we are back to doing our work as of tomorrow, knowing which government we're working with to start building those relationships, and of course continue to engage opposition, critics, and leadership in the journey, because it really takes everybody to make progressive policy and to move ahead to really address societal needs. And you know, when they take off the performative mask, they are human, and they need human connection to relate to the policies that they need to make. So back to relationship building for any and all causes, not just for disability rights, but for women's issues, etc. We know that tariffs are the big headline and are dominating everything. Grassroots groups are going to have to work a lot harder to get in the door, to get attention on women's issues, on family issues, childcare issues, seniors issues, the issues of people with disabilities. The cabinet's going to be lean and mean, no matter which government, no matter minority or majority territory, and therefore some of the high-profile ministers that we had for specific causes are no more. They're collapsed into larger portfolios, which some would argue gives more power to the minister at the cabinet table to make things happen. It also means that they just have a lot more competing priorities within one ministerial portfolio. So we're really, really going to have to work hard to make sure that we can advance the issues that we care about.
Brother Firas, I want to ask you a question, but just before I do, I want to give an update on where we are in the elections. Right now, the Liberals are at 158 seats, the Conservatives are at 134, Bloc Québécois is at 24, and the NDP are at 8. Now, Brother Firas, you know, you spoke a little bit about Carney's strategy, and you know, you were highlighting some of that. You know, we've spoken to many different people in the field. We've spoken to many community leaders, regular voters. And do you feel that the Liberals have done enough? And do you feel like maybe some people are voting more for the Liberals instead of against the Conservatives, not just, you know, not because they're motivated to vote for the Liberals? Or do you feel like people are actually motivated? Because I know, again, different ridings, maybe some Liberals are better than others, but I just wanted to get your overall thought on that.
Well, unfortunately, we're back to fear voting. Unfortunately, the number one motive for the Muslim community is fear, is seeking protection of the Liberals from the Conservatives. And we have to be clear and honest about this. Did the Liberals do enough for us? I personally don't think so. I had multiple discussions with ministers or ex-ministers, Ahmed Hussein, Omar Al-Ghabra, especially from our community. And I expressed our frustration of, 10 years of solid liberal government having four majority, and then the rest of them, they had the NDP on their side. So they could have done a lot more on major files that concern the Muslim community. And I want to tell you something that I will never forget. In July of 2021, we had the summit on Islamophobia. It was, I believe, July 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. And a day before, it was July 21st, we had the summit on anti-Semitism. So the two summits, 2 consecutive days, and I attended both. And so it's just for me to learn how different communities have influence on the government. The anti-Semitism summit, Justin Trudeau started the summit by saying, we've done everything you asked us to do. And this is all on record. Anybody could go search it on the government's website. However, his opening statement for the anti-Islamophobia summit, he said, "My hands are tied. I couldn't do much." Honestly, for me as a community activist, I was very disappointed with this statement. Not because he said it. This is actually what he did on the ground. He had a lot to do. He could have had a lot more strict laws to protect us from Islamophobia, to combat Islamophobia. They dragged their feet in the first 4 years on major laws that were put forth by the previous conservative government. I personally believe, and I know a lot of Muslims believe, that the Trudeau government, 10 years, could have done a lot more, but they didn't. The question is, why did that happen? I think it's our fault, because exactly what's happening today, we're again running, or a lot of people running, although I have to be very honest and clear that the Muslim coalition this year, Bismillah, mashallah, did a great job in the new approach to move with dignity, to move with power, realizing that we do have power. We cannot just submit to one party, even if we are scared of the other party. But in general, from the numbers that I've seen, from the community members that I've spoken to, from the internal conflicts that we had in some ridings, a lot of people did not accept that courageous, bold move by the coalition. They were so scared, and they actually believed that if one liberal candidate falls, to them, that means Pierre is coming and the conservative is forming a government. So unfortunately, the short answer is the community is still, a lot of our members motivated by fear, and the Liberal Party did not do enough in the last 10 years. And I'm hoping people with access and connection will actually send a strong message to the Liberal government to make sure that the coming years, especially the coming 4 years, if they form a majority government, will be a lot better than the previous 10 years.
Inshallah. So we'd like to just give you each a minute to share what are your final thoughts for Canadians and for the Muslim community, not just about the elections, but moving forward. What's next? And we'll start with you, Brother Yasser.
So I'm glad you said that, because I really think we have to think of the elections as always the starting point, not the end point. Whichever government is in place is there to serve the citizens. Whichever candidates win their seats in parliament are answerable to their constituents. And so as Muslims, as advocacy organizations, and the entire community, we have to stay on the ball. We have to stay with our advocacy. We have to hold our government and our representatives accountable. We have to continue to articulate our concerns and our issues, and we have to continue to press for meaningful action, not just lip service to our causes. I think that heading into this, it looks like it's going to be a liberal government. It's not clear yet whether it's going to be a minority or a majority. We have to call on this party to do better. And we have to press the other parties to also do better, to engage the Muslim community and not to write us off.
Thank you. Imam Sikandar, please do add on and share your thoughts.
Yeah, certainly. No, I agree with everything that has been said. I mean, I think, there's, again, it's the night is getting late, but I think there's still, more polls reporting, and I think it remains to be seen whether it's going to be majority, minority. I really do think that a lot depends on that. If the Conservatives have a strong showing, even though, if they're not forming government, it's possible that Pierre Poilievre stays on, and a lot of the Harperites, who are currently running the party, continue to stay on. And I think that will continue to be a concern for many Canadians, including many Canadian Muslims. I think the government, the next liberal government, from what it seems, will have a really tough job ahead. Of course, dealing with Donald Trump and the threat of tariffs and annexation, but not just that, but just the high expectations from all the NDP supporters who may have supported the Liberals, from the various communities, in particular the Muslim community, and especially the principled approach that Brother Firas was talking about. The expectations are going to be very high. If it's going to be a minority government, I think we're going to have to stay on edge because it could come down at any time. If it's a majority government, our advocacy will continue to will need to continue and continue very strongly. And my last point is going to be that this united approach, mashallah, that we saw this year in this election is unprecedented. I mentioned earlier, perhaps I think that I've been a political observer in Canada since I was about 6 years old, and to my knowledge, this is the first time that the Muslim community has united in this way. So my appeal to all of our brothers and sisters across the country will be that when there is an effort of this type, where people have cast aside their partisanship, they have cast aside their loyalties, and they're trying to come together and are leading advocacy, national advocacy organizations, leading local advocacy organizations are coming together to try to do something. Let's give them our support. I think it's incredibly harmful for the community when there's too many chefs in the kitchen and everyone's trying to do their own thing. It can be confusing for the community, certainly. But I think in those times when you find that there is a group trying to unite the community, and there are people who are from different stripes of all types coming together, then let's try to give them our support. And let's try to trust them. These are some of the best minds in the country, the leading advocacy organizations, lawyers, strategists, religious people, faith leaders. We've really got the brain trust of the community nationally coming together. Let's stand behind them. And of course, we place our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we also have to mature as a community and stop, bickering and fighting really over everything. When there is a group that is trying to lead seriously and mature.
So before we go on with our other guests and get their final thoughts, I just wanted to let you guys know, Mark Carney has, they've already said that he's won his seat, so his seat has been secured. And many outlets, including CBC, CTV, The Washington Post, The Guardian, have already projected a liberal, the Liberals have enough seats to form government. I wanted to ask you, kind of what is unfolding in front of you since you're there. How is the mood? How is the vibe? What does it look like there?
Yeah, so I'm just across the Rideau Canal from the Rogers Convention Center here in Ottawa. You can see behind me, and that's where the Conservatives are gathering tonight, and Pierre Poilievre will be speaking there. I'm not inside, but I can imagine that the mood is probably very somber. And by the way, it's very interesting, this election, because I think this is the first time maybe in Canadian history, or the first time in a long time, that both major party leaders, the both leading candidates to be prime minister, were actually running in neighboring ridings. So Mark Carney chose the riding of Nepean to run in. That was held by Liberal MP Chandra Arya since 2015. You may remember that he had actually run for the Liberal leadership against Mark Carney, but then was disqualified. And then he was also disqualified from even running for re-election as a member of parliament. So Mark Carney chose to run in Nepean, and right next door to Nepean is the riding of Carleton, which is a primarily rural riding here in Ottawa, with some pockets of urban areas. And that has been Pierre Poilievre's riding for about 20 years now. He got elected there in 2004. So this was a very interesting dynamic. Pierre Poilievre, of course, we've been hearing in the news that his seat was in question. That he could actually lose to his Liberal competitor Bruce Fanjoy. Bruce Fanjoy had support.
He's actually trailing right now in the election.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Bruce Fanjoy is at 582. Poilievre is at 405.
So this is a race to watch because, in my view, and I think this is what observers would agree, if Pierre Poilievre was to lose his seat, which is not impossible because, he had support coming in from across the country to help him out. And Liberal Bruce Fanjoy was getting support from across the country as well. Former BC Premier Christy Clark was actually in the riding of Carleton this weekend, to door knock and to support Bruce Fanjoy. He was getting donations from across the country. So there was a real, coming around Bruce Fanjoy, people thinking that if he could defeat Pierre Poilievre in his own riding, which would be unprecedented, then that would send a really strong message. And if that happens, there's no way that Pierre Poilievre can continue to lead the Conservative Party. So that's a riding certainly to watch. But what I wanted to point out was, Pierre Poilievre was in Mississauga yesterday. He visited the Filipino church to offer his condolences. He was in Oakville. He was in Pickering. And he flew back to Ottawa. And he had his final rally in his riding of Carleton at a farm in Edwards, Ontario. And there, he said something which really struck me, because the quote was, whatever happens tomorrow, is what he said along those lines, that regardless of the outcome tomorrow, I want you to know that I will continue to fight for you. That's what he told his supporters. So, when you have a political leader who started his leadership by saying, I am running to be prime minister, if you remember those commercials, for him to say, whatever happens tomorrow, that means that he is not certain that he has a path to victory, as it has played out tonight. His wife, Anita Polyev, has been by his side, throughout the campaign, even before, and she cried openly yesterday as they waved at their supporters and parted ways there. I'm pretty sure that time they knew that tonight was maybe not going to be a good night for the Conservative Party.
Wow, thank you for highlighting that. Sister Rabia, would you like to share your final thoughts with the community based on what we've discussed so far?
Absolutely. Agreed with everything that's been said so far. We need to pick up on the momentum and carry it forward for the next 4 years or so. This is the beginning, not the end game. Oftentimes we kind of get all excited during a campaign, and then we just forget all about it and go back to having photo ops, free photo ops. So I've been saying throughout this election that no more free photo ops for anybody. So any kind of opportunity that requires a photo op has to come with a private, direct conversation, and a conversation where we table our issues not only related to our identity as Muslims, but related to our reality as Canadians. We have an affordability crisis in this country. Soaring food costs, soaring housing costs. People are struggling. People are truly, truly struggling. The working class, the middle class, and not to mention people who aren't working, who aren't able to work, who are living in poverty, are just finding themselves in deeper, deeper poverty. With the political uncertainty with our friends south of the border and the tariff threat, the attention is focused elsewhere, but locally people are hurting, families are hurting, everybody's struggling, and we need to make sure that we relay those messages locally to our elected officials at all levels of government, not just federal, but local, provincial, and federal, that we educate our community and continue to educate our community to understand which issues are run by which level of government, because oftentimes we mix them all up and we vote based on some misinformed sense of who can fix what. So that educating needs to continue, that engagement needs to continue, and of course, let's continue working together. We are maturing as institutions. We have built new organizations and strengthened existing ones to do that awareness, relationship building, educating, lobbying, advocacy work. We need to continue that work, and everyday Muslim Canadians who are donors need to look at their donor behavior and give consideration to putting their money where we really need it in the work that needs to be done for our society. And really understand that this work can only happen effectively if resources are there. One thing we know, and especially when we observe politicians pandering to different groups and the different messaging that they send to different groups in the same breath, and why they always fall short when it comes to our issues on Islamophobia, on the genocide, on war and terrorism and hate and crimes, etc., is because they pander and give in to whoever controls the money and ultimately controls media. So we have to mobilize money. We are a wealthy community. We are a generous community. We need to mobilize money to create media, to create content, and to also politically engage with contributions so that we do hold power that goes beyond the photo ops.
Thank you so much, Sister Robbie, for highlighting those key issues. Brother Frost, please do share your final words or your final thoughts on this with us.
Jazakumullah khair. For me, the best thing that ever happened to our community was the coalition of Muslim organizations, activists, advocacy groups. And for me, what I would love to see is the continuation. And I can't say what I would love to see because we have already committed in the coalition, inshallah, to continue. So we do want to grow this stronger, adding more people that are playing in the same field. We need to let the entire Muslim community coast to coast to know about it because, alhamdulillah, we did a lot of great things, but it was, a huge learning curve for us. And we need the entire Muslim community to know about it. So we need to solidify the coalition and we need to start the negotiation immediately after, and starting tomorrow. We need to continue negotiating with sitting MPs now and party leaders. We need to get more exposed to the community because this will be our best tool in the next elections, inshallah, where when we sit down with the community, this trusted body, which inshallah will be able to market even better, we'll need to grow the trust of our community, and this trusted body will definitely do a much better job in the next election and will be the true source of protection. Right now, we're seeking protection in parties. We want to have protection from within, from our organizations, from our political bodies. These bodies that will be protecting the Muslim community with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is my hope, and this is what I would love to see, inshallah, happening in the next even few days, right away after this election.
I can't thank you enough for joining us and providing these very valuable insights to our viewers and to us. I hope in the future we can have maybe longer, more in-depth discussions, and we could touch on a lot of different key issues. So Jazakumullah, I don't want to keep you any longer, but we really do appreciate your time. All right, so what I want to do right now is just go through what is taking place, give another snapshot of the breakdown. Liberals are at 156, conservatives at 147, Bloc Québécois at 25, and the NDP is at 10. And I want to go through some of the key ridings that we have been discussing throughout the day and a lot of the ridings that we interviewed a lot of the candidates in. So let's just do a quick rundown of that. In Brampton Centre, the Liberal candidate leads by 184 points, 184 votes. Brampton East, the Liberal candidate Marinder Sidhu leads by 185. In Chinguicoke Park in Brampton, the Shafqat Ali, who we obviously interviewed, leads by 122 votes. Shifting to Mississauga, the Liberal candidate leads by over 1,000 votes, 1,060. Mississauga East Cooksville, Peter Francesca leads by 189 votes. In Erin Mills, Ikra Khalid leads by 67 votes. Lakeshore, Charles Sousa leads by 623 votes. In Streetsville, surprisingly, the conservative candidate Sue McFadden leads by 93 votes. In Oakville, the Liberal candidate Anita Anand leads by 275 votes, who a lot of activists had a problem with, and I think her lead could have been a lot more safe and secure. But that was some stuff that was unfolding at that time. Oakville West, the Liberal candidate Pam Damov leads by 714 votes. In Milton, Z Hamid leads. This is the wrong file. And in Eglinton, the Liberal candidate leads by 136 votes. In Hamilton, Matthew Green leads by 55 votes. In Markham, again, we were seeing in Stouffville, the Liberals lead by 600 votes. In Unionville, the Conservative leads by 37 votes. And I just want to... Okay, we're going to check those numbers for the Polyev riding. We had given you an update on that earlier. We're just going to check those numbers and get back to you on that one.
Okay, amazing. And so we've gone quite into the night now, and we've heard some of our amazing analysts who talked a little bit about, especially in the Muslim community, what this is going to look like, not just now, but in the future. And so with that, I want to remind everybody that the coverage doesn't end here. We, inshallah, will be continuing over the next few days to cover more crucial issues, to talk to voters about their reactions to this election, and to see what is coming up next. Brother Ahmed, is there anything else you would like to add?
I just want to say that the numbers have gotten a little bit tighter throughout the night. Obviously, we knew that in Middle Canada, Conservatives have a much stronger hold on the ridings there, and they would see a surge, but they're still expecting that the Liberals will have enough to form government.
All right, thank you. Is there any final statistics that you would like to share before we close off for today's segment?
Well, I would just tell people, keep your eye. I think we're going to know some, the final results very soon. It was honestly an honor and a privilege to be sitting with you here throughout the day and bringing you these live updates. It was very, it was a very nice experience to have. It was very nice sitting with you. You were a pleasure to work with as well. So I really appreciate that. And obviously we have a team behind us here that have been working tirelessly behind the scenes. I want to thank every single one of them. Jazakumullah khairan. Really appreciate it. And you, our viewers, for joining us and taking part in the discussion.
And that was our 11 p.m. coverage and with GTA Muslims Today. Once again, make sure to stay tuned for upcoming coverage and upcoming updates over the next few weeks, inshallah. I'm Sakina Ghayur.
I'm Ahmed Ramadan.
And thank you so much for tuning in. That was the 2025 GTA Muslims Today federal election coverage.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
In 2025,